Welcome to Easy Peasy Books, From Author to Authority, the lively and engaging podcast for business professionals who've always believed they have a book in them. I'm your host, Jillian Whitney. Join me as I chat with authors and industry experts from all around the world to explore simple strategies to write, publish, and leverage your business book. Whether you're an entrepreneur, executive, or an employee, this podcast is for you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Easy Peasy Books podcast. And I am here today with a special friend who is down under, or I'm up over. I never know the right expression. I just know she's in tomorrow and I'm in today, and it's so fun. And I love my Australian friends. So I have Gina Balarin here today in the house today, and I'm going to have her introduce herself before we get stuck in talking about whatever we're going to talk about today. So Gina, before we get stuck in, please tell people who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm Gina Ballerina. Yes, I really was a ballerina, but that's not what I do today. Today, I help people feel amazing on the screen, on the stage, and on the page. What does that actually mean? It means I focus on helping those in senior leadership positions share their authentic voice in a way that doesn't just create an impact for them, but creates a lasting impact for their organizations. So my favorite way of describing myself is that I help turn doubt into applause. But it's not necessarily the person who's standing behind the microphone who has the doubt. It is the question of how that doubt translates. So I've been in communications for many years. I'm a chartered marketer, a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, a fellow of the Australian Marketing Institute. I sit on the board of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, and I'm a certified professional marketer. Lots of letters after my name. But what's really passion for me is communication in all its forms. And it probably comes back from being Gina Ballerina, because when you learn how to communicate with nothing but your body, when you cannot speak, you learn some amazing subtleties that stand with you for a lifetime. And so part of my ability to help people speak as a professional speaking coach is about also helping them understand what they're not saying, but what their body and their intention is saying.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And let me add in that you are also an author, and we see your book just peeking out at us in the background. But if you just hold it up for a second, please. I love it. I love it. The Secret Army. I love that title. That's a brilliant title. And it says leadership. What's the
Leadership,
subtitle?
Marketing, and the Power of People.
I love that. I love that. And then, of course, on top of that all, if it wasn't enough, let's just throw in that you gave a little TED Talk thingy. No, you gave an awesome TED Talk thingy. It was a beautiful TEDx talk, and I actually watched it today in preparation for our podcast. And I have to just say, you so impressed me with that TED Talk, because you rattle off stats and you're just like, oh, I don't know how you do it. It's just like whenever somebody can say, I'm going to tell you 3 things, 4 things, I'm like, my heart goes out. It's like, oh my gosh, numbers. I don't know. I'm a presenting dyslexic. I can't do numbers on the stage, but I just have to say that your TED Talk is like, it's living the test of time because it's still valid, but it's pre-AI. So, you just kind of go, wow, there's where we were in marketing then. Marketing's crazy, but everything you talk about is still so, so relevant. So I'm going to actually put the TED Talk into the show notes as well, because I think it's a fantastic thing. So you've written a book.
And thank you for that compliment, by the way.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. So you're an author. You're obviously a speaker. You have done way more than TED Talks. You're a presentation coach, professional presentation coach, everything, a communications coach, everything in between. So what I wanted to focus our chat with today is so many times I talk with authors and they're just like, I've written my book and now I'd like to learn how to leverage my book and make my way from the page to the stage instead of the other way around. And we can talk about maybe it's actually better to go the other way around if we've got some newbies who are sitting there going, I want to be a speaker and I want to be an author. What's the right order if I haven't done anything? But let's start with people who have written a book. And let's kind of go, okay, you've written that book and now how does it do anything for you? Maybe let's even just start with that. How much of a credibility booster is it being an author? So let's start with that.
Once upon a time, it was almost impossible to write a book and to get it published. Those barriers have been completely broken now that we can self-publish and put a book up on Amazon. Really, it's as simple as creating a PDF, picture, choosing an image and going boom, bam, boom, it's out to the world. But that is just the tip of the iceberg. If you can literally create a shopping list and put a picture on the front and publish that as if it were a book, what is standing between you and credibility? And the question is really what goes into a book as well as what surrounds a book. So let's think about what goes into a book. And this is answering your question about whether you want to take the book onto the stage, or you want to take the stage into the book. It really depends what your background area of expertise is. So let's assume you've written a book like The Secret Army. This one's 150 pages. It was only 150 pages because it gets more expensive if you make a book that's more than 150 pages. It could have been 200 pages because I tend to write a lot. But the point is that structuring your book helps you understand what your key messages are. And presumably, by the time you've published a book, you've decided what your chapters are, what your sections are, whether you have subsections within each chapter. And this is the question I always like to ask anyone who's writing something or who's about to speak. When your audience has finished consuming that message, it could be that moment that you're speaking on stage, or it could be that presentation that you're giving at a bachelor party, maybe not a bachelor party, maybe a wedding. But the point is, you want your audience to think something. You want them to feel something. And if you're in a business context, you want them to do something. Think, feel, and do. So hopefully, those of you who've written books have already got an audience in mind. Now, when I wrote The Secret Army, I did not have an audience in mind. I wrote because I was desperate to get the messages out there. I wrote because I felt like this was a really important message to share. And in retrospect, I think I did have an audience in mind that I just didn't market to. How ironic is that, right? I am a marketer with all the credentials, and I didn't do my own marketing. And it's quite common for authors because we think that just writing the book is enough. Newsflash, it's not. If no one reads your book, there is very little point in having written it unless there is just like a back scratch of, back pat, well done. Look at me, I wrote my book. To be honest, I've written more than one book. The first book I wrote, it was simply for the sake of us to be able to say I have written a book. But I never even managed to find a publisher for it because back in those days, self-publishing wasn't really a thing. You could do it, but it didn't have any cachet. You didn't take it seriously. And it was a romantic fiction novel. And eventually, after a few years of me going, I'm looking for a publisher, I'm looking for an agent, my husband said, you haven't found anyone, just stop. I can't put any more energy into talking about your book. I'm done. And I wrote the second one because then I wanted to publish the book. And so I published the book. So let's go back to talking about structure. In your book, you've got a structure, you've got your chapter layout, you've got your contents, you've got your chapters and your subsections. Every single one of those has the potential to be a presentation. Or not necessarily an entire presentation if you don't have enough robust information within that context, but certainly an anecdote within a presentation. And so the first starting point is decide who you're going to talk to, what you want to talk to them about, but more importantly, what they're going to get out of it. The vast majority of people who do presentations think that it's about them, and that's the biggest mistake that most of us make. Why do we get so nervous up on stage? Because we think people are judging us. Yeah, sure, fair. People are judging us, but more to the point, they're trying to figure out how what you're saying can add value to their lives.
Mm.
So if you can focus on the parts of the book that you've written that really deeply resonate with the people you're speaking to, that is your starting point.
Mm. I love that.
Years ago, and this is a story in the book, I had a drama teacher. I was doing research at the time, as you had to do at an academic university. And she said to me, Gina, it's fine, but you've got to do these two things. You need to simplify and you need to amplify. And she was absolutely right. And there is, in fact, a chapter about that. It's a story within the Secret Army. You see what I'm doing now? I'm bringing the context of the book back into the presentation. What does simplify and amplify mean? It means take the essence, distill that. Take that and distill it even further until you end up with the one key phrase or message, the thing that if no one else could remember anything except that one key message, that's what you want to leave them with. Then amplify that. So in this context, my message would be find what your audience truly cares about and really make sure that they understand that message so that it doesn't just click logically, it clicks emotionally as well. And so that they can go away knowing not just that you're a great speaker, but they can actually take action on that point to change something in order to improve something.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I love that. I love that. So if we think about, so I've written this book, I do what you've said, kind of go through it, figure it out from there. And maybe I have stories in my book. But do I want to take those stories to the stage? There's a difference of like how I would maybe write a story versus how I would tell a story. Plus also too, do I go thinking they've read these stories? So now if I go and tell the story, they're going to be bored. Like I know storytelling is so important in speaking, but how do we juggle that with the stories that are in our book?
That's a really tricky question. I'll use an example of Daniel Pink, actually, because years ago I went to see him at an event and I just read his book, Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates People, which is basically about selling, ironically. And I saw Daniel Pink on the stage and I was so excited to see him because I'd read the book and I really hoped that he would bring more to the stage than I had read in the book. And I was very disappointed. Not because he isn't a great speaker, he is. Not because he wasn't articulate and coherent and he knew what the audience had in mind, but because he was presenting the same content that I'd already read in the book. And so I think the answer to this lies in something that they also teach you in a chapter I talk about called the content marketing striptease, which is always leave them wanting more. The art of the striptease is as much about what isn't revealed as what is revealed. And in any great journey that you're going through on the stage, in a chapter, you're kind of wanting to keep people on the edge of their seat. So if you've got a great story and it illustrates your point specifically, ask yourself, is there a way that I can present some of the story and give people insights and then refer them back to my book? Is there a way that I can use that story and then enhance it? People often think that a book is something that you create once and then it's done. But if you think about a living book, it becomes a story that you learn from, that the people you talk to learn from, that they can elaborate on. So one great way of thinking about a book that's lived its life, that's kind of cast in stone, is that it's just a jumping off point, actually. So I can tell the story about my drama teacher talking about simplify and amplify. But if I'm talking to a very specific audience, let's say accountants, I would probably want to go back to them and say, you know, you understand all the numbers, you understand all the fiscal responsibilities that you have. But you're used to simplifying the content so that you have your profit and your loss. Now, how do you amplify that? And this might be, for example, an illustration of communication. I might say to them, the next time you're talking to a non-financial person, how can you make sure that they get that that message is relevant to them? So you're going to simplify it. This is the profit. This is the loss. You're going to amplify it by saying, if we do this, this is our result. If we do this instead, this is our result. And in our context, I recommend we do this and this and this, and this is why. Simplified, you've amplified. I've used the story, but I've applied it in a completely different context. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I like that, because to me, it's like you're almost saying, reframe it, reframe it for the particular audience that you're speaking with.
Yeah.
And, and maybe even like you could put the story about the story behind the story, because I always love those. It's like, here's the story, but let me just between you and me, and you're talking to a whole audience, you tell them the story behind the story of like, well, why did your teacher tell you that in the first place?
Exactly.
So then they kind of feel like, ooh, we've been let in for a little bit of something secret here, a little, now we feel really, really special. So I could see that. And that's perhaps what Daniel Pink could have done in his presentations, is kind of like, well, give us the backstory of those stories, and especially, or even just changing it up a little bit. And like, if you have a character, tell us more about Mikey. Why did Mikey do that? And how did you even know Mikey? And like, what's Mikey doing now, or something like that? Giving us those extra details, I think really, I think that, but I know what you mean. I have been to talks where somebody has given the same story and it's exactly the same. Like you just go, oh my God, this is memorized, and it's just, and it's the same words, same dramatic pause, and it's like, oh, that's his M dash. Like, it's like so obvious what they're doing. And it's just like, it's snooze fest.
So if we think about the elaboration of stories, one of the exercises I like to do with clients is to try and force them, and it's hard for most people, to think of their story in different lengths of time. So to start with and go, I've got 30 seconds to tell that entire story. Okay, now I have 2 minutes to tell the story. Now I have 5 minutes to tell the story. And usually it goes the other way around, because they tend to start with a 5-minute story and we've got to kind of cut it back and cut it back. And that really is the principle of simplify and amplify when you think about it. Because if you have a 5-minute story, well, I don't care about 4 minutes and 50 seconds of it. All I want to know is what happens in the last 10. And that really is a principle that applies in any context of communication. People want to know, what's in it for me? WIIFM. What's in it for me? Remember, people don't care about you. They care about themselves. And the mistake that a lot of speakers make is they think that if people come up to them afterwards and go, that was an amazing presentation, that they have somehow won. They've somehow succeeded. But actually, you don't want to be congratulated on the presentation. You want to be able to help people realize what happens next. So that was an amazing presentation. I'm going to go away and apply the lessons that you taught me now. So maybe an opportunity when you've got your book and you're elaborating on that speaking context is to go, I learned this. At the time, I had this emotion. But what I have since learned is this. And in fact, I did some research and discovered that that was correct, but it's even more like this now. And here's what I'm going to do instead. And here are the tools that I can use to do this. And here's how I'm going to make this happen. And this is a fundamental shift. And often people who coach or who give workshops are much more inclined to be able to help you get to that next stage, that stage of mind shift, that stage of change, exercises, processes, and so on. But you owe it to your audience to be able to help them step out of the page into the real world and make a difference, not just based on what they've read, but how they can actually act that in real life.
Oh, yeah. And because that way your words are matter. Your words do matter. You're making an impact. You're making a difference. And, bottom line, like if you kind of go back to the TED Talk, it's really about, ideas worth sharing, with an underlying worth. It's not just you getting up there and spouting off at the world. It's like, how is your insight going to make a difference to me? How do I hear that and just go, wow, that gave me a whole shift on how I see things. And so I think that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So let me ask you, okay, so I've written a book, and say, for instance, I'm trying to figure out my audience of who I would think I could give a talk to. And then from there, like, are there different kinds? Like, is it like, do I want like a keynote versus a TED talk is one thing, a keynote is another. Maybe I want a panel. Like, how do I figure out what's appropriate for my book? What are all the different options?
You're muddling up two different things there. One is your
Okay.
audience, and two is your context.
Okay.
I'll be blatantly honest, Jill. It's hard to find speeches that people are prepared to pay you for. It's much easier to find speeches where people are happy to suck up your knowledge and then for pass it on. So let's start with, where can you do a talk?
Okay.
Well, often there are contexts of local networks that will happily help you. There are often contexts within your regional area. So it might be a chamber of commerce that's relevant to you, or a business advisors group, or just, anywhere that people hang out in groups. More often than not, if they're hanging out in a group, someone's organizing that group, which means that if those people are relevant to what you're doing, then they're probably going to be happy to hear from you if you have something relevant to say to them. The second thing is then the context that you speak in. So let's break down. We've got a TEDx talk, we've got a keynote address, and we've got panel discussions. Now, if you want to do a TEDx talk, you have to embed yourself in the world of TEDx. There are TEDx events all over the world. Every organization, because TEDx are independently organized TED events, there might be one 5 minutes down the road from you. There might be one on the opposite side of the country from you that is relevant. They will have processes and procedures that they'll expect you to go through in order to submit your talk. They may ask you to do a pre-recording of a video. They may ask you to do a synopsis. It's all contextual. And the advice I would give is, if you do decide you want to do a TEDx talk, do your homework. Find out where the topic, because they'll usually have a topic that they're talking about, is relevant to what you're wanting to talk about. So you can't just write a speech and then randomly pitch it to 50 different TEDx talks. Well, you might be able to. It may be that speech is relevant to one context and not relevant to another. And if you just keep trying as many times as you possibly can, you'll ultimately find someone who's relevant. But what's more likely to happen is get to know the organizers, get to understand what's going on in your local area, figure out how you can be part of that community event, attend some TEDx events, figure out what the formula and the structure is, watch them online. If TEDx is your goal, it's a whole different level. And just to be clear, if you want to do a TEDx talk, I'll tell what I told my client who didn't deliver a TEDx talk, but did a TEDx style launch event for his corporate company. I rehearsed for 50 hours.
50
hours for a 15-minute speech. Wow. So it's not a thing you can just randomly do something, and you have to want this very, very badly. Okay. Now let's talk about panel discussions. Now, panel discussions tend to be where there is an organization that's running an event and they want experts on a specific subject to come in and talk about that specific subject. So I'll go back to my previous finance example. There might be a panel called The Future of Finance, and they want chief financial officers from specific different sizes of organizations. In that case, if you were the CFO who wanted to present at the events, it would be logical for you and your team to identify which events are relevant to your organization and where is the value that you add as not just a CFO, but a CFO with specific opinions or specific insights into a specific context. Where is that going to be relevant for you? If it's hard to be a panelist unless you are invited, because more often than not, people are looking for something very specific on a panel, and often it's about relationships as well. So again, the question is, look at what's happening in your context. Let's say that they're hosting an event on wellness in your regional area. Well, it may be that there's a wellness event happening in a month's time, and you know that they're going to talk specifically about your area of expertise. Maybe you're someone who specializes in neuropathy. Maybe you're someone who specializes in podiatry. I don't know. And there's nothing to stop you from saying, hey, you guys are running this event. Can I be part of your panel discussion? But also realize that sometimes if you want very specific events, you have to plan a long, long way in advance. And this is often a problem that people have with speaking, is they don't realize how much time it takes, not necessarily to write or prepare or present the speech. And you can get someone like me to help you with that if you're struggling. It's about how determined you are to get your message in the right place at the right time. And that might mean that you have to be having conversations with the right people a year before you get up onto the stage. So it's not a quick fix. It can be for some people. And again, if you've built your expertise, you've built your brand, you've built it consistently, the chances are that you're going to be top of mind when they want to interview someone. So as we use our wellness example, if you were a podiatrist who spent all of your spare time absolutely obsessed with providing really helpful information about people's feet, if there is an event that's about wellness and they happen to be talking about foot health, you're probably going to be the person that springs to mind. But again, it's not an overnight success. It is a time-consuming, brand-building, relationship-building, connected, consistent, tenacious activity.
I love that. I love that. So let me just ask one sort of follow-up question. Do you often see more people going from page to stage or stage to page? Sort of like when the people that you work with, do they kind of get their ideas, they do their speeches and say, maybe I should turn this into a book? Or do they seem to go the other way? I made a book and now I want to speak about it.
The people in my network, and the people who I've worked with, tend to want to go from page to stage because they think I've got this great message now, I want to put it out there in the world. But I'm actually working with a client at the moment who wisely came to me and said, I want to be on the stage. And I gave her the spiel. I'm like, it's hard. Do you have the right message? Do you have the right audience? Is it going to work for you? And it turns out she did. She has an incredibly powerful story. She has a very concise and clear view of who she could actually provide this talk to. And I think she could genuinely make it work. But in working together, we actually decided that it would be better for her to write her book before she tried to pitch it on the stage. Exactly for the reasons that I said right at the beginning. If you're super clear about what you want people to think, feel, and do, if you're super clear about what your chapters are, what the logic, what the structure is, and what message you want to leave people with, it becomes much, much easier to be able to spread that message. And in her context, what was even more important is that if she wants to speak up on the stage, you don't often get paid for speaking on the stage. That's a whole different discussion about being paid to speak on the stage. But what people will often do is if you make a good impression on the stage, they will buy your book.
Yes. And that gives you the visibility because as we know, as marketers, these books, they don't sell themselves. It's not like it goes up on Amazon and all of a sudden it's like everybody's like, oh, angels start singing. Okay, your book is here. Amazon's been waiting. It's just like crickets. And, we have to get out there and talk about our book. Like, yes, we want people to read our book, but sometimes we have to just get our book in their face first, and let people know. And that's the hardest part because that's where the selling comes in, or the marketing, not necessarily the sales, but the marketing,
absolutely.
The visibility.
But don't forget that once you have that credibility of speaking, you can always leave them wanting more. And by the way, if you want to know more, you can read the book. Like, doesn't that just feel natural and comfortable? Yep. I'm not pitching to you. I'm not selling to you. I'm not saying, hey, read my book. I'm saying, here's valuable information. If you want more valuable information, additional, there it is. Go for it.
And then that really is, I think, a gem for anybody who's listening today, is that if you're going to go out and talk, like even at your local chamber or wherever you're going to go give a talk, do what you said about the striptease of like talk a little bit about, and then just say, give them a snack, and then say, and in my book is the full course, so that they say, oh, okay, I wanted to know about such and such. Give them a quick win so they can see it. But then, but of course, I cover so much more in that in the book. It sells itself that way. It sells.
And the point is to make sure that the snack in itself is complete and nutritious and tasty. There's nothing more frustrating than someone going, I once fell flat on my bum on stage. You can read more about it in my book, which is, by the way, a true story. And you can't read about it in my book, but you can read about it in a post on LinkedIn. If you're interested, I'm happy to share the full story with you.
I like that. I like that. You've left us wanting more. So now I'm gonna have to. Okay, so now I have to remember. I'm gonna put your TED Talk and now the post on LinkedIn as well, because it's good. Because these things, they that to me is again about visibility. Because stories, we remember a story. So it's like if you become known for, oh, this story. That's great, because then that just makes you more memorable and stuff. So I have to ask, we're kind of nearing the end of our time together. I just want to ask, what is next for you? So it's like you've kind of accomplished everything. Where do you go from here? Like you are wonderful at helping clients, and obviously everybody listening today is just like, okay, great. I know where I'm at and where I need help with, and they can of course reach out to you. But where are you at professionally? What's the next thing for you?
Well, the question, of course, is dominating the world, because I've worked in Europe, I've worked in Africa, I've worked in Australia. Now I'm keen to make sure that my American audience can come to me and I can help them with that global context to be able to make a difference. Because let's face it, why are we talking on stage? Yeah, to a certain extent, it's for ego. To a certain extent, it's to overcome that fear. There is a huge number of people who suffer from stage fright. But hopefully, if you have the conviction that is so strong in you that you've written a book about it, and the conviction is so strong that you really want to put that message as if you were wrapping a gift and giving it to someone in a speaking context, then let me help you wrap up that package so that when you give it to someone, they get it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wonderful way to end. Wonderful way to end. So thank you very much for being here today, Gina. This is great. You've given us all sorts of great advice and golden nuggets and left us wanting more. That's a great example of that. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today and is listening on the podcast or watching on the podcast as well. Either way. And we will see you all back here next week for another episode of Easy Peasy Books Podcast. Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Easy Peasy Books, from author to authority. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful if you could leave us a review. It helps other aspiring authors discover our podcast. To learn more about writing, publishing, and leveraging your business book, visit my website at easypeasybooks.com.